On Wednesday, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at combating anti Semitism on campus, which would deport non citizens who took part in pro Hamas rallies on campus. And many folks are saying that this action was sparked by the protest at Columbia University. Well, on your screen, you will see Columbia University Shai Davidai, who's kind of become the face of the pro-Jewish, pro-Israel side during these now infamous protests at Columbia. So Shai, shalom, my friend.
Shalom. Thank you for having me. And I have to tell you one thing that I've been described so many times as pro-Jewish, pro-Israeli. I tell people, hey, I am Jewish and I'm Israeli. Who do you want me to advocate for? That I'm not picking jerseys. I'm not picking teams here. This is my family. This is my community. This is my life. I just rather people talk about me as the guy that's fighting terrorism on campus.
Wow. Okay, so I definitely want to get your take on the executive order, but I think it's important for us to set the scene, because I think a lot of folks say, "Oh, it's protesters. Oh, it's some people, blowing some hot air." I don't think most people really understand what this executive order is even attempting to combat. So, if you could, what is it like standing up for Israel and the Jewish people on Ivy League campuses, specifically Columbia?
Well, I tell people that in order to understand what's going on, they need to go back to October 8th, 2023. And the chronology here is extremely important. On October 8th, 2023, the student organizations at Columbia sat down to write a letter in support of the events that had took place the previous day. Those events were the October 7th massacre, the massacre of more than 1,200 Jews and Israelis in Israel by Hamas terrorists, the raping of multiple women, and the taking of more than 250 hostages, many of them American, Canadian, French, people from Europe, people from Australia. So when people tell you these protests are against the war, they will use words like genocide, which obviously have lost all meaning because they intentionally distort the meaning of the word. But they have to remember the protests started before one Israeli soldier has set foot inside of Gaza. The protests started with Hamas's attack on Israel. That's an important thing to say. When you see these protests, especially for me, I was born and raised in Israel. You have to remember, I know what Hamas looks like. You see the same rhetoric from Hamas, Hezbollah terrorists. You see that this is not about a peaceful solution. They never say peace or coexistence. They say, we do not want two states. We want all of it. There is only one solution: intifada, revolution. So I actually grew up during both intifadas. Intifadas in Arabic literally means shaking off, but in practice, the two intifadas in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have been bloody attempts at exploding buses, restaurants, suicide bombers, shootings, mass knifings, etc. Now, of course, you can say these are all interpretations, so you can look at the protesters' own words. The protesters at Columbia, and when I say protesters, I mean both students and faculty, have not only expressed open support for the armed resistance, meaning that they support US designated terrorist organizations. They've not only glorified Yahya Sinwar, the former head of Hamas that orchestrated the October 7 massacre. They had this event where they were reading his last will, but they've also been supporting a terrorist faction called the Houthis that is in Yemen, while the Houthis were shooting missiles, not at Israeli ships, but at US and British ships. So they were shouting, Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, turn another ship around. So you need to understand that this is not just anti-Jewish or anti-Israeli, this is also anti-American, which explains why you've heard the leaders of Hamas, of Hezbollah, but also of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, expressing their gratitude and support for the protesters at Columbia and other campuses.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you for that insight. Let me read you part of the fact sheet that Trump set out, ordering the Justice Department to to do the things like, let me just read it verbatim so I don't get it messed up. The fact sheet said things like he would order the Justice Department to aggressively prosecute terrorist threats, arson, vandalism, and violence against American Jews. He goes on to say, to all the resident aliens who joined in the pro-jihadist protests, we put you on notice. Come 2025, we will find you and we will deport you. I will also quickly cancel the student visas of Hamas sympathizers on college campuses, which have been infested with radicalism like never before. So as, again, the public face of a lot of this, what is your initial reaction to this executive order?
So I haven't read the exact words, and that's important for me. As a professor, I have to say, a lot of people have been opining about things they don't know. I haven't read the exact word, but I can tell you from my own personal experience. I came to the United States in 2010 on a student visa. I saw my student visa as getting into an agreement with the government of the United States. As long as I fulfill my responsibilities, I will get the privileges of living and working and learning in American institutions, right? So for example, I was so afraid to even get a speeding ticket because I didn't know what that would end to. Every time that I entered the United States through JFK, Newark, I was worried. Even once I was taken to a separate screening at a different room, until they saw, yeah, he's just a guy getting his PhD. That's the law. That's what I signed on to. As long as President Trump's executive order focuses on people that broke the law, focuses on them impartially, regardless of their ethnicity, gender, sex, national origin, and gives them due process to defend themselves in the legal court, I see no problem with that. In fact, I went earlier today to read when you apply for a student visa, when you apply to any visa actually in the United States, you have to answer certain questions. One of those questions are this: have you ever or do you intend to provide financial assistance or other support to terrorists or terrorist organizations? That's not me. That's US government questions of every student coming into the United States. Now, obviously, very easy for me. No, of course I haven't done, and nor do I intend to do that. Now, it's important, the financial assistance or other support. If you come to the United States or to any Western democracy and express support to the terrorist organizations as they are defined by that democracy, then you should be held accountable for your actions. Again, as long as it's done legally, due process, and impartially, I see no problem.
Well, I correct me if I'm wrong, Shai, you're still barred from entering Columbia's campus. Is that correct?
I am not only barred from entering all Columbia facilities, including the Jewish Center, including the medical facility. I'm also barred from my office. And earlier today, it's been 3.5 months since I've been able to go into my office. And earlier today, I emailed the university, the dean of the university, saying, I need to get into my office to get some books, some mail, some personal possessions. The university would not let me go into my office. So I said, can my wife come instead of me? You have a problem with me, I've been speaking out, and you don't like that, that's fine. Can my wife come and collect some of my personal belongings and things that I need to conduct the work and the research that you pay me to do? And they said, no, your wife cannot enter your office. So now I'm in back and forth through the university's lawyers to get my stuff. But this is how they treat people who speak about what's happening on campuses.
I can already start to see the comments on YouTube, and the ones that are going to come up. And I think you're the perfect person to answer this objection. I'm just going to throw this softball up. You hit it however you want. I'm basically giving you an opportunity to respond to probably the most common objection, which is this. Okay, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Zionist. I don't hate Jewish people. I just don't like what Israel's doing. And so if I think they're committing genocide or apartheid, whatever, I'm justified in doing A, B, and C. What would your response be?
First of all, I would be very sympathetic to everyone. I don't cancel people. unlike some factions in academia, and especially in these protests, I don't cancel people. I'll say, let's have a conversation. Thank you for expressing your objection. Let me now explain, as someone who's Jewish and Zionist, what that means. Zionism or anti-Zionism started in Soviet Russia in 60s and 70s as Soviet propaganda to create their own version of anti-Semitism. And they said, we won't target Jewish individuals, but we will target Jewish institutions and Jews as a community. What does that mean? We will target the Hebrew language, that is the language that connects Jewish people. We will target the institutions where Jews congregate, meaning synagogues and cultural centers. We will target Israel as the largest, most abstract sense of Jewish entity, and we will target the idea that Jews are a people. Because if we accept the fact that Jews are a people, then we have to accept the fact that like a people, like any other people, they deserve the right to self-determination. In fact, if you believe that the Palestinians have the right to self-determination, which I personally do, and I get a lot of flack from the right, and I personally do, you should also believe that the Jews have a right to self-determination. Saying you're anti-Zionist means I do not believe that the Jews have the right to self-determination, meaning I do not believe that the Jews are either should be treated as a people that, like any other people, or the Jews should be stripped of their peoplehood. Both things, I'm sorry to say, are anti-Semitic. Now, of course, you can, and you probably should, criticize Israel's government, just like you should criticize every government. But you should not be calling for the annihilation of the state of Israel. And saying, I oppose Israel is anti-Semitic, while saying, I oppose Israel's actions, Bibi Netanyahu, this specific policy. Now, of course, if you do that, you want to ask yourself, why are you so obsessed with Israel, but you're not obsessed with China, who is only eclipsed by Iran in their violations of human rights? Why are you not obsessed with Sudan, which is what is happening there is an actual genocide? Why are you not obsessed with Venezuela? Why are you not obsessed with all these other countries, Russia? And when you do criticize them, if you do criticize them, why are you not calling for the destruction of China, the destruction of Russia, the destruction of Venezuela? Of course you are not, because you don't conflate the policy of the government with the people. And yet when it comes to Israel, you do, making you, unfortunately, an anti-Semite.
Wow, Shai, that is so very helpful. I hope that you are reinstated as a Columbia professor very soon. Thank you again for your time. Toda rabah, as they say in Israel, and we'll be talking again very soon, my friend.
Thank you. And I will always say, I am always happy to have conversations with everyone and anyone. If people can follow me, I'm on Twitter, on Instagram, Shai Davidai, ShaiDavidai. I don't cancel people. I have only two rules: no hate, no lies. As long as you don't come with hate and you don't come peddling falsehoods, we're in conversation, and that's the best thing we can do.
Awesome. Well, yes, definitely do get in contact with Shai. He's an incredible man. Again, Shai, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much.
The United States now, where raids have been reported in several cities as President Donald Trump follows through on his promise to stop irregular migration. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, joined operations in Chicago, where irregular migrants and their families aren't the only ones in fear of the enforcement effort.
Early morning raids in Chicago carried out as part of nationwide operations. These images of what the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency called targeted raids had an immediate effect across the city. In the city's Little Village neighborhood, known as the Mexico of the Midwest, the streets were noticeably quieter than usual, and not just because of the frigid temperatures.
It's fear. Many here have watched the news and people are very afraid. I think it's that, and yes, also the temperature, that it is very cold. I think it's a mixture of both.
Matter of fact, there's a friend of mine, she is usually on the next block over, and she's not here no more. She's a vendor. and she's not here. And I noticed a couple other vendors, they're not around. More than less likely, they're probably undocumented and they're afraid to come out.
It's what President Trump said that is affecting a lot of businesses. There are people who are afraid to go shopping or visit restaurants because they are scared of those things.
For many restaurant employees, it's already noticeable.
By now, there should be more people here. There should be more movement. It has been like this since Inauguration Day, but there was a decrease even before with less people here. It feels strange on the streets. People are more stressed. Many don't know what might happen tomorrow.
A question that many business owners are also asking themselves. Some are already raising the alarm.
Businesses, we have heard from several that about 50 to 60% loss, the amount of people who are coming in. Usually this is a slower time of the year, but it's been way slower than normal time, right? And if people aren't coming in, then business owners are going to be faced with that difficult decision of whether they, cut some of their employees or maybe cut a shift so that they close earlier. So it's going to have a heavy economic impact.
And apart from customers not coming in, there are other economic concerns. There are estimates that half of all of those working in the restaurant industry in the state of Illinois, where Chicago is located, are migrants themselves, and especially those who don't have their paperwork. It's a fear that they might try to avoid their workplaces, thinking that not only some customers, but also they themselves might be victims of these raids.
Well, DW's Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber filed that report from Chicago, as we just saw, and he joins us now from there. Benjamin, great to see you. So there appears to be a real sense of fear among the people you were talking to, right?
That's right. And even if the people have not seen ICE, have not seen immigration and customs enforcement agents, they move in different cars. So it's not the normal police cars. But there was a lot of fear talking to street vendors, talking to people in the restaurants, even those who are legally here. We tried to talk to them also to get them in front of the camera to share this feeling of fear. We had a couple of voices in there, but it's because they're also saying even if they have the paperwork and if they can be here, those places, if ICE actually shows up, they might actually also ask them for the papers. So there is a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty what that would mean, not just for the businesses, as we just saw in the report that we filed from Little Village, but also what it will mean to family members or maybe friends that may be affected by these promised rates.
Now, Benjamin, do stand by because we're going to listen now to Trump's press secretary, who described Trump's deportation policy as a big cultural shift. Let's listen in.
Is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so therefore, you are subject to deportation. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
So, Benjamin, basically the Trump administration has described people living in the United States illegally as criminals. So what message is this sending out to the millions of people in that situation? Essentially to live in fear, right?
They live in fear, and it's psychological, not knowing what might happen to them. We've heard from parents who are too afraid to take their children to school, to go out, to meet friends. So there is indeed a lot of fear because the administration was saying if you have not committed a crime, you shouldn't be worried. These are targeted raids that are being carried out. But as we just heard there from the new White House press secretary during her first press briefing in the White House, if they say that everyone who came into the U.S. regularly is a criminal, then everyone would be in danger of these deportations. We hear that there are so many new messages and executive orders being signed by the White House. We had one earlier today affecting Venezuelans who live here in this country legally. There was something, a humanitarian parole that was extended in the last weeks of the Biden administration under then the Minister of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. It was revoked now, so people who are living here legally are not sure what that could mean for them and for family members who are living in fear, many of them avoiding going out to not be at risk of these deportations that are happening, also especially in sanctuary cities like Chicago, where the Trump administration, wants to send a signal, of course, for the politicians that are in charge here.
Paint a picture for us. What happens to people who are arrested or detained?
So first, ICE, as I said, they use different vehicles. They want to go or find certain people. They are then sent to detention centers where they are being questioned. The White House is saying and using also on social media, saying that it's only people that committed crimes. We've heard other reports. So there's a lot of reports. Of course, we have to be very careful with confirming that information that is being sent out also by NGOs. We heard that they are on high alert, that they are communicating with local politicians. So in case something like this happens, they tell people to record these raids, to tell them that they also have rights, that they should know, have, for example, phone numbers of other people. That is the advice that they are giving to those who might be in one of those situations where they take their kids, for example, to school and can't come back. But that's a lot of signaling and a lot of new policies that are being implemented, and it's very, very quick. But we see that it's already having an impact, because only having those pictures on television of seeing Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, taking part in those operations here, having Dr. Phil, a TV host, of course, scares many people already. Even if they don't see ICE, they know that that's happening, and that's leading for them to try to stay at home as much as possible.
Now, you're in the state of Illinois. The governor there, J.B. Pritzker, says Donald Trump will not have a free hand to operate in the state. Is there any sign of resistance from local authorities across the United States?
So the situation of Chicago is a sanctuary city is different. We also know that in other states, like for example California is a sanctuary state. There are other cities that have additional measures in place or policy to prevent ICE, to prevent this immigration and customs enforcement officials of working with local authorities or working with police. We recently saw a social media post by the mayor of Chicago saying that police is not involved in those raids. So ICE is doing that alone, and they are also not giving them additional information. And that's something where many schools or many churches are afraid of giving them this access. You just mentioned the governor of Illinois. We've heard that some local politicians have vowed to fight back, have vowed to protect their migrant communities who are living in fear. But this is not just about policies, it's also about signaling. And with the latest news that we heard from the White House of President Biden announcing that he will sign an executive order instructing both the Department of Defense and Homeland Security to build a detention facility at Guantanamo Bay that might house up to 30,000 people. That's the number that he said is sending a signal, as they have many measures using what they have on the Department of Justice side of the Department of Homeland Security, having these deportation flights in military transport machines that we covered last week in El Paso. So a couple of measures that they're announcing of what they say are fulfilling one of the main campaign promises, that is tackling irregular migration in this country.
Certainly a big shift in the past several days in the United States. We'll leave it there. Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber joining us from Chicago.
And earlier, I asked our reporter in Washington, Stephen Simons, to tell us more about Trump's plan to send migrants to Guantanamo Bay.
Well, according to the president, this is his new plan. He will sign the executive order at any point in time now. And he's envisioning Guantanamo Bay, a different facility from what we normally know or understand Guantanamo Bay is, to host and to house up to 30,000 criminal illegal migrants in the United States. Well, those 30,000 criminal illegal migrants have to be caught first, then brought to this different facility. And one caveat, officials say behind the curtain that there is no way this facility, this migrant facility, which always existed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, that this will hold 30,000 people. So that was maybe so in the 90s, but that's not the case anymore. Now, the president is adamant about it. He said this will double the capacity of the United States to house and hold those really bad criminals. Illegal criminals who, he says, that he doesn't even want to send back to their home countries because their home countries can't be trusted to actually keep them there. So that's the whole spiel. Guantanamo Bay, a different Guantanamo Bay, not the facility where terrorists, still 15, are housed, will be opened to receive criminal illegal immigrants from the United States, according to the president.
Okay, Stefan, now tell us, is this plan by Trump likely to succeed, given what you've just said?
Well, good question. Maybe a trick question. It probably will, but there are some hurdles to take. Number one, follow the money. Who's paying for all of this? And second question, the military is heavily involved or would be heavily involved in this. This expands, so to speak, the definition of how to use military assets, Pentagon, US military, for the detention of illegal immigrants and transportation, because they have to get somehow to Guantanamo Bay first, right? Envision this in military transporters, etc., etc. Then you have to increase the staff. A lot more U.S. military personnel would have to be stationed there. That all comes with a lot of costs. Plus the question, is it that easy that the president can expand the role of the U.S. military? And that is maybe something lawyers, attorneys, and Congress has to answer. So there are obstacles potentially, but it might succeed.
Okay, now Guantanamo Bay does have quite a controversial history. Could you tell us a bit about that and the US activities there?
Yeah, of course. So now we're back Guantanamo Bay from yesteryears. That is where foreign militants were housed, 750 at its peak, and that comes from the time of the war on terrorism. You'll remember 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush, former President George W. Bush, established Guantanamo just in 2002, and anybody who was caught by U.S. military assets in the war on terror was sent to Guantanamo Bay. There are still 15, the most famous of them all. Maybe you will remember the name, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the so-called architect of the 9/11 attacks. He's still there since 2006. The oldest prisoner still there, in terms of time spent there, was detained there, or arrested and then detained in Guantanamo Bay in 2002. So he spent, 23 years in Guantanamo Bay in lockup. And again, 15 are still there. But again, the migrants, what Trump's plan is to send migrants to Guantanamo Bay. That is a different facility in Guantanamo Bay held by the United States military.
Stefan Simons in Washington there. Thanks a lot for that, Stefan.